My wife cheated on me with her boss and drained my bank account of $250, $0 to buy a house with him. Then I found out she forged my signature to sell our family home after she filed for divorce. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can support us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let's keep this channel growing collectively. Thank you very much. Now let's begin the video, using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the guy writing something like this, but here I am. My wife Emily seemed perfect, beautiful, smart, successful. We'd been married for 8 years, building a life, a home, a future. We had 2 kids, a nice house in a quiet suburb, and everything looked good on the surface. But I started noticing little things that didn't add up. Her phone ringing at odd hours, her being unusually secretive about her messages, and her dismissive attitude when I asked about her day. Nothing outright obvious, but enough to make me suspicious. Still, I didn't want to jump to conclusions. I trusted her, or at least I thought I did. Then one evening I came home earlier than usual from work. I wasn't supposed to be home until late, but something told me to check her phone. I didn't plan to invade her privacy, but I just had this gut feeling that something was wrong. I quietly snuck into our bedroom and saw her phone on the nightstand. I grabbed it and started scrolling through her messages. That's when I saw it, an exchange with her boss, Mark, that was way too intimate, flirty, suggestive, even downright sexual at times. She was calling him babe, sending him pictures, and talking about how much she enjoyed spending time with him. My stomach dropped. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I couldn't believe it. My wife, the woman I loved, was cheating on me with her boss. And from what I could see, this wasn't just a fling or a one-time thing. It looked like they'd been at it for months. The worst part, they'd been planning to buy a house together. I found emails and bank statements showing she drained our joint account of $250, $0, money we'd saved for our kids' college fund, for emergencies, for our retirement. She used it to put a down payment on a new house with Mark. That was the moment everything changed. I felt a mix of rage, betrayal, and helplessness swirling inside me. How could she do this? How could she lie to my face every day, pretend everything was fine? And what made it worse was the way she lied about everything afterward, denying any affair, insisting she was just stressed or working late. I knew better, I had proof, but confronting her now was going to be a nightmare. I wasn't even sure what I wanted to say, just that I was devastated and I needed to figure out what to do next. Over the next few days, I watched her behavior shift. She became more bitchy, dismissive, and defensive. Every question I asked, she spun some bullshit excuse. She told me she was stressed from work, that Mark was just a friend, that I was overreacting. But I had the messages, the bank statements, the receipts. It was all there. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach repeatedly. I couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. My mind kept playing back that moment I found the messages, her lying to me, her betrayal. I started to realize this wasn't just about the affair. It was about everything, her betrayal, the money she stole from us, her lies. I started planning how I was going to confront her properly. I knew I couldn't just accuse her without evidence, so I gathered everything. The emails, texts, bank statements, anything that could prove she'd been cheating and draining our savings. I also decided I needed to find out how deep this went. Was she planning to leave me? Was she already living with Mark? I started digging into her phone and bank accounts, trying to connect the dots. It was like unraveling a web of lies I never knew existed. Honestly, I felt numb. Part of me wanted to break down and cry, part of me wanted to scream at her. But I knew I had to stay calm, at least for now. I had to be strategic because I knew she was capable of lying her way out of anything. I also suspected she might try to cover her tracks or spin some story that made her look like the victim. So I kept my cool, stored everything securely, and prepared myself for the inevitable confrontation. I kept asking myself, how long had this been going on? Had she been planning this all along? Was I just a fool for trusting her? It was hard to accept that the woman I loved, the woman I thought was my partner, was capable of doing something so cruel. but I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. The truth was staring me in the face, and I had to face it head on. What I didn't know yet was just how deep her deception went, or how far I was willing to go to get justice. The day I finally decided enough was enough, I sat her down in the living room. She was perched on the couch, her face tight and dismissive, like she already knew what I was going to say. I laid out all the evidence I had collected, screenshots of her texts with bank statements showing the withdrawal, the emails about the house purchase. I watched her eyes flicker with panic for a brief second before she masked it with that bitchy smirk she always used when she thought she was winning an argument. She looked at me and said, "You're crazy, Jason. You're just overreacting because you're insecure. Mark is just a friend. You're reading into things that aren't there." Her voice was calm, but I could hear the edge of contempt. I knew she was lying, but I also knew I couldn't just yell and accuse her without giving her a chance to spin her story. So I pressed her, asking how long this had been going on, how much money she'd taken, and what her plans were. She rolled her eyes and snapped, "Look, I didn't cheat on you. Mark and I are just working on a project together. And as for the money, you're just paranoid. I needed a fresh start and I was going to tell you, but you're so damn controlling and suspicious all the time. Maybe if you paid more attention to me, I wouldn't have had to do this behind your back." Her words cut deep. I wanted to believe her, but the evidence was too overwhelming. Still, I held my temper, knowing that losing control wouldn't help. She then threw in the classic "it's not what you think" line, trying to manipulate me into doubting what I saw. That moment, I realized she wasn't just cheating. She was trying to gaslight me into questioning my own judgment. She kept insisting she loved me, that she made a mistake, and that she'd stop everything if I just forgave her. But I wasn't about to fall for that. I told her I needed some time to think, to process what I'd found, and that I wasn't going to just sweep this under the rug. Over the next few days, my mind was a mess. I felt betrayed, angry, and deeply hurt. I couldn't believe she'd lied to me for so long, not just about the affair, but about draining our savings, about planning to leave me. I kept replaying her words, her smirks, her dismissiveness. It was like I'd been living with a stranger all along. I also started to realize how much her betrayal had damaged our lives. She'd taken $250,000, money we'd worked years to save, to buy a house with her boss. That wasn't just betrayal, that was theft. I was furious, but I knew I had to be smart. I reached out to a lawyer, started looking into legal options. I didn't want her to get away with this, not without consequences. I also hired a private investigator to confirm what I suspected. Was she already living with Mark? Did she plan to leave me and the kids? I needed to know the full scope before I made any moves. The more I found out, the clearer it became that this was a planned betrayal, not just a moment of weakness. Meanwhile, she kept trying to gaslight me, calling me crazy, paranoid, and jealous. She told friends I was just insecure and overreacting, trying to turn everyone against me. I felt like I was fighting a losing battle, but I refused to back down. I couldn't let her get away with it. The worst part was seeing her so calm and dismissive, like she didn't care about what she'd done or about how much she'd hurt me. One night I caught her sneaking out of the house, her phone in her hand, acting secretive again. I followed her and saw her get into Mark's car. That was the final nail in the coffin. I realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was okay. I had to make some tough decisions. I knew I'd have to confront her again, lay everything out, and demand she face the consequences. But I also knew that I had to protect myself and my kids from her manipulations. The betrayal had gone too far, and I was done playing nice. I started planning my next move, how to get her out, how to take back control of my life. I'd been humiliated, drained financially, and emotionally wrecked. But I also knew I had a chance to take everything back if I played my cards right. It was the beginning of a long fight, and I was just starting to realize how deep her betrayal went. I was angry, but I was also determined. I owed that much to myself and to my kids. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I'd been hit by a train. The adrenaline from the previous days was wearing off, and all I could think about was what I'd discovered. I decided I needed to get serious about this. I couldn't just sit around and stew in Anger, I had to do something concrete. So I called my lawyer first thing. I told him everything, how Emily had drained our account, the affair with Mark, her plans to buy a house, and her latest sneaking out. He listened carefully, asked questions, and then told me to gather all the evidence I could find. I did that overnight, pulling out my phone, my bank statements, her emails, everything I could find. While I was at it, I also hired the private investigator I'd been talking to. I didn't trust her anymore. I needed to know if she'd already moved in with Mark or if she was planning to leave us completely. I couldn't afford to be blindsided. The pie confirmed it. She was with Mark at his place last night. They'd been living together for a few days. That was the confirmation I needed. My wife was not just cheating. She was actively planning to leave me and take my children's lives with her. That realization hit me hard. I looked at my kids sleeping in their rooms, and I felt this terrible mix of rage and sadness. She'd betrayed us all. She'd taken our savings, lied to my face, and was now moving out to start a new life with her boss. I knew I had to act fast. I couldn't let her get away with this. I started drafting legal notices, demanding she return the money, stop all contact with Mark, and stay away from the house until we sorted things out legally. I also wanted to freeze her accounts, just in case she tried to transfer more money or hide assets. Meanwhile, I kept thinking about her lies. How she had spun stories about being stressed, about needing a fresh start, as if that made everything okay. I remembered how she'd told me I was overreacting, that Mark was just a friend. But the evidence told a different story. She'd been lying to my face for months. I felt so stupid for trusting her, for thinking we had something real. She was just a user, a manipulator, a bitch who had no regard for the vows we took or the family we built. In the middle of all this chaos, I also started talking to friends and family, trying to get some perspective. Most of them were supportive, telling me I needed to fight for my rights and protect my kids. But some of her friends were defending her, saying she was going through a rough patch, or that I shouldn't jump to conclusions. That only made me more determined. I knew the truth, and I wasn't going to let her manipulate everyone into thinking she was innocent. As the day went on, I prepared to confront her again. I knew I couldn't let her stay in our house. She'd already crossed every line. I contacted a moving company to pack her things and arranged for her to leave that afternoon. I also told her I was filing for divorce and seeking full custody of the kids. She tried to argue, saying I was overreacting, that she loved me, that she'd stop seeing Mark. But I didn't believe her anymore. I'd heard enough lies. When she arrived home that afternoon, I didn't even look at her. I handed her a legal notice, told her she had to leave immediately, and told her I was done. Her face twisted with anger and contempt, but I didn't care. I knew I was doing the right thing. She packed her bags, throwing a tantrum, calling me crazy, paranoid, and possessive. She insisted she was innocent, that I was ruining her life. I just looked at her coldly and said that her actions had consequences and that I wasn't going to let her destroy our family anymore. That night I sat alone in the house, feeling numb but oddly relieved. The woman I thought I knew was gone, replaced by someone I couldn't recognize. I felt betrayed, humiliated, but also a strange sense of clarity. I realized I had been living in a lie for too long. I had given her all my trust, all my love, and she had thrown it away for some affair and a quick buck. I was angry, yes, but I also knew I had to rebuild. I couldn't let her win. She'd taken enough from me. Now it was about reclaiming what was left, protecting my kids, and moving forward. It wasn't going to be easy, but I was done being the victim. From now on, I was going to be the one in control of my life. The days that followed were a whirlwind of legal battles, emotional exhaustion, and trying to keep everything together for the sake of my kids. I remember sitting at the kitchen table, staring at the mountain of paperwork, trying to piece together the chaos Emily had left behind. She had already filed for divorce, and I knew I had to prepare for a long fight over custody and assets. The worst part was watching her try to spin everything, telling mutual friends she was forced out, that I was abusive, and that she was the innocent victim in all this. That bitch had no shame. I hired a good lawyer, someone experienced in divorce and asset recovery. We started the process of freezing her accounts, seizing her assets, and making sure she couldn't hide or transfer any more money. I also filed for full custody of the kids, knowing Emily's priorities had shifted from us to her new life with Mark. I wasn't about to let her manipulate the system or turn the kids against me. I wanted them safe, and I wanted her held accountable for everything she'd done. Meanwhile, I started to piece together what her plan had been. The house she bought with Mark was a clear sign she'd been planning her escape for months. She drained our savings, forged my signature to sell our family home. She even had the audacity to lie about it, claiming I'd given her the authority to do so. That was the moment I realized how deep her deception went. She'd been willing to destroy everything we built, just to chase her own selfish desires. I felt a mix of rage and despair. How could she do this to her own family? I also found out that she'd been secretly taking money from our joint accounts for months. Not just the $250, $0 for the house, but smaller amounts too. She'd been living a double life, pretending to be the loving wife while secretly plotting her escape with Mark. The betrayal cut deep. I'd trusted her, loved her, and she'd been planning her new life behind my back. It was like I'd been living in a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. One night, I caught her trying to contact our bank to transfer more money, claiming she needed it for urgent personal reasons. I had the bank freeze her accounts immediately. I also hired a private investigator to track her movements. Turns out she'd been staying with Mark at his place, and they'd already been making plans to move out of state once she finalized everything. She was trying to disappear to start fresh with him, leaving me and the kids behind. That realization hit me hard. I was furious. How dare she take everything from us? Our home, our savings, our family, just to run off with her lover. I knew I had to do everything I could to stop her. I filed a motion for an emergency custody hearing, arguing that her actions demonstrated she was unfit to care for the kids. I wanted to keep them safe from her manipulations and her reckless pursuit of this new life. I also made sure to gather witnesses and evidence to prove her pattern of deception and financial misconduct. Throughout all this, Emily kept up her act, acting like the victim. She'd call me controlling, accuse me of ruining her life, and cry about how unfair everything was. But I refused to buy into her lies anymore. I knew her true colors now. She lied, cheated, drained our bank accounts, forged my signature, and was now trying to leave us all behind. The rage inside me simmered constantly, but I had to stay focused. I couldn't let her manipulate the court or the kids. One day, I found out she'd hired her own lawyer trying to fight my custody claim. I knew it was just her way of stalling, trying to buy time or wear me down, but I was determined. I had everything on my side: proof of her affair, the forged signatures, the financial theft. I wasn't going to let her get away with this. I also started therapy to handle the emotional toll. I couldn't let her see me broken. If anything, I had to be strong for my kids. Looking back now, I realize how much this whole ordeal changed me. I trusted her completely, and she betrayed that trust in the worst possible way. I learned that sometimes, the people you love the most can turn out to be the biggest enemies. I also learned that you can't control other people's choices, but you can control how you respond. I had to fight for what was mine: my family, my dignity, my sanity. It's not over yet, but I know I'm on the right path. Moving forward, I'm focused on rebuilding, on making sure she doesn't destroy us completely. And I swear, I'll do whatever it takes to protect my kids from her lies and her greed. The court hearings were the most draining part of this entire ordeal. Every time I sat in that courtroom, I felt like I was reliving the betrayal all over again. Emily showed up with her new lawyer, looking all composed and innocent, like she hadn't just drained our entire life savings and forged my signature to sell our family home. She kept insisting she was the victim, that I was just a controlling husband who didn't understand her needs, and that her affair was just a mistake she regretted. But I had all the proof: text messages, emails, bank statements, the forged signatures, and I wasn't about to let her spin her web of lies. The judge listened carefully, and I could see that I had a strong case. The evidence of her financial misconduct and her plans to leave with Mark painted a very different picture from what she was trying to project. I argued that she was unfit to have custody of the kids given her reckless behavior, her dishonesty, and her blatant disregard for our family's well-being. I also submitted the evidence of her draining the accounts, forging my signature, and secretly planning her escape. Emily's lawyer tried to argue that I was trying to control her, that I was overreacting, and that she deserved a second chance. But I cut her off, presenting everything I had gathered. I told the court about her affair, her lies, and how she'd used my trust to steal from us. I insisted that the best thing for the children was stability and safety, which I could provide while she was busy chasing her new life. The judge took all of it into consideration. After hours of testimonies, evidence presentation, and arguments, she ruled in my favor. She awarded me full custody of the kids, ordered Emily to return the stolen money, and froze her assets until the next hearing. That was a huge win, but I knew it wasn't the end of the story. Emily was furious, calling me vindictive, controlling, and ruining her life. She stormed out of the courtroom, screaming at me that she'd be back and that I'd regret taking her children away. In the aftermath, I felt a mixture of relief and exhaustion. I'd fought hard and I'd won, but inside I was still hurting. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, of having trusted someone who turned out to be so selfish and manipulative. I also felt a strange sense of guilt. Was I a bad husband? Did I miss signs? Could I have done something differently? But deep down, I knew I hadn't done anything wrong. She was the one who lied, cheated, and stole from us. I just fought to protect what was left. I also started to rebuild my life piece by piece. I hired a financial advisor to help me recover from the financial blow. I began therapy to deal with the emotional scars, and I focused on my kids, making sure they knew they were loved and protected. I kept reminding myself why I fought so hard, for them, for my sanity, and for my dignity. Looking back now, I realize how much I've learned from this nightmare. Trust is fragile, and sometimes the people you love the most can betray you in ways you never imagined. But I also learned that you can survive betrayal and even come out stronger. I'm still healing, still trying to put the pieces back together. But I know one thing. For sure, I will never let anyone take away my peace and my family again. This experience has changed me forever, but I refuse to let it define me. I'm determined to move forward, rebuild what I lost, and make sure my kids grow up knowing they're loved and protected, no matter what. Do you want me to continue with the final part? Since everything happened, I've had a lot of time to reflect on what I went through and what it all taught me. Honestly, I never thought I'd find myself in a situation where I'd have to fight so hard just to prove my worth and protect my family. But here I am. What I've learned is that betrayal cuts deep, but it also reveals who people really are. Emily's actions showed me her true character: selfish, manipulative, driven by greed and lust. I used to think I knew her, but now I see that trusting blindly can be dangerous. The biggest lesson, though, is about resilience. I thought I was broken during those dark days, but I found strength I didn't know I had. I learned to stand up for myself, to fight for my kids, and to rebuild from the ruins of her betrayal. It wasn't easy, and it still is. I carry scars, emotional, financial, and trust-wise, but I also carry a new sense of clarity. I realize that I can't control other people's choices, but I can control how I respond. I can choose to be better, stronger, and more cautious in the future. For anyone going through something similar, my advice is simple. Don't ignore the signs, but don't jump to conclusions either. Gather evidence if you suspect something is wrong, and don't be afraid to seek help, legal, emotional, or both. Trust is a fragile thing, but it's also something you can rebuild slowly once you know the truth. And most importantly, never let betrayal define you. You are more than someone's mistake or their selfish actions. You are worthy of respect, love, and happiness. Looking ahead, I plan to focus on my kids and myself. We're rebuilding our life piece by piece. I've started a new job, bought a small place of my own, and I'm learning how to trust again, carefully this time. The pain of betrayal will never fully go away, but it doesn't have to consume me. I've learned that sometimes you have to hit rock bottom before you can start climbing back up. And when you do, you come out stronger, wiser, and more prepared for whatever life throws your way. So to anyone reading this who's in the middle of their own storm, hold on. Keep fighting. Protect what's yours. And never forget that even in the darkest moments, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. It might take time, but you will heal. You will find your way again. And someday, you'll look back at this chapter and realize it made you who you are today, a survivor.